Hey guys, in this video we're going to be looking at a paper which looked at what field hockey injuries are most common and what we can do about it to help prevent injuries in the future. A systematic review from 2018 looked at 22 papers that analysed injury reporting data in field hockey from a range of different levels. They broke down injuries by injury site, whether it was upper body or lower body. They broke it down by the level they were playing at and which competition was involved. And also they sought to find out what were the most common injuries and what we could therefore do about it. In terms of injury rates, what they found was that injuries varied from anywhere between 0.1 per 1,000 hours to all the way up to 90 per 1,000 hours in the African Cup of Nations and a competition in Asia. This represents a percentage-wise of 0.01% to 9% injury rates, depending on the level of competition. And this suggests that there are multiple factors at play here. The physical demands at different levels are going to vary, which is why the injury reporting data can vary so much. And the way in which the injury data was reported also varied, which is why we get a bit of variance in the data. Finally, things like playing surface, equipment availability, skill level all play into the injury rates depending on the level at which the players are performing at. Now, in terms of injury site, the lower limb was the most commonly affected area, representing around 70% of the injuries reported. The upper body represented around 20%, and then there was some head-face injuries, as well as things like the trunk and upper back. Now, most injuries affected the lower body, but there were also upper body injuries, as well as head and face contact injuries as well. Within the lower body, things like knee injuries, ankle injuries, and groin injuries were most common. In the upper body, things like shoulder and hand and wrist injuries were very common. And then there were also injuries to the face and the neck as well from contact-based injury. In terms of playing position, midfielders and forwards were the players who got injured the most. And this is likely because of the involvement in the amount of running, change of direction, and high intensity actions that they need to perform on the pitch whilst they're performing. Forwards represented 32% on average of the total represented injuries. Midfielders were 28% and defenders were 24%. Now, goalkeepers, although they represented a much smaller percentage of injury, they did have unique injuries based on their playing position. Things like shoulder injuries and hand and wrist injuries were slightly more common, and that is just due to the very, very specific nature of the playing position that they have. Now, what this means for you is that we can now be more aware of what the most common injuries are, so we can prepare our bodies more effectively for the demands placed on those injury sites. For example, we know that knee and ankle injuries are the most common non-contact injuries in hockey. So we can physically prepare ourselves for those demands, looking at things like our ankle range of motion, calf strength, looking at things like our hamstring strength and hip range of motion. These things all play into our risk of injury in the future. Now, this also means we can be aware of the fact there's actually quite a lot of contact-based injury, sometimes things we can't always prepare for, but we can with things like using effective equipment, making sure we're preparing properly, making sure we're warming up for competition as well. So practical tips for you based on this information would be, number one, to prepare effectively for training and competition. We know that in competition, more injuries happen. So prioritize mobility work, make sure you're fully prepared for the game by doing a complete and thorough warm-up prior to competition, and also make sure you've got a physical preparation program in place so you are getting yourself in the best position possible to go out and perform at your best. Secondly, protective gear. Make sure that you are using a mouth guard, shin guards, and any protective equipment that is relevant for you so that you can reduce your risk of injury. They really do make a difference. Thirdly, avoiding overtraining. Make sure we're balancing the amount of training we're doing week to week with our ability to cope with that, not having sudden spikes in the amount we're doing week to week, and making sure that we're managing our training load week to week. Finally, improve our game awareness and tactical understanding so that when you're on the pitch, you're more aware of where you need to be and the position you need to be in so that the unplanned change of direction or unplanned movements of other players aren't going to take you off guard and increase your risk of injury. So we're preparing for them, we're anticipating them, we can also be less likely to get injured. Hope that's been a useful short summary of some of the key and common injuries in hockey, what you can look to do about them, and what is the most important focus point as a hockey player to reduce your risk of injury overall, some of the key factors you need to consider. If you've liked it, please like the video and subscribe for videos like this. There'll be more coming out in the next couple of weeks. And if there's any questions you have, please pop a comment down below.